What happens when a peaceful day in the park turns into a viral moment of injustice? Watch as one woman's fight against systemic abuse sparks a movement for accountability and change. The park was serene, a rare moment of peace in the bustling city of Fort Collins, Colorado. Camille, a respected attorney with a reputation for defending the voiceless, sat on a wooden bench near the pond. A thick, hardcover book rested in her lap. The air was warm, the sun casting dappled patterns through the oak trees, and she allowed herself a moment to savor the stillness. Life, with its endless court battles and demanding schedules, could wait. Her peaceful reverie was shattered by the screech of tires. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb, and two officers stepped out, their faces stern. They scanned the area, locking eyes on Camille, the only person sitting alone. "Ma'am, may we speak with you?" one officer called out, his voice sharp. Camille closed her book carefully and met their gaze. "Of course," she replied, her tone calm but wary. "We got a call about some suspicious activity in the area," the second officer said, stepping closer. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Camille raised an eyebrow, her surprise evident. "Suspicious activity? I'm sitting here, reading." She held up the book for emphasis. "Can we see some ID?" the first officer demanded. Her pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. "What's the reason for this?" "It's routine," the second officer said, his tone clipped. The small crowd of parkgoers had begun to take notice, murmuring among themselves. Camille sighed, reached into her bag and handed over her driver's license. "Camille Johnson," the first officer read aloud, his tone almost mocking. "What's your business here, Ms. Johnson?" "I live in this city. I came here to enjoy the park," she replied evenly. "Is that a problem?" "We'll see," the officer muttered, handing back her ID. But instead of leaving, they lingered, their questions growing more invasive. "Do you always carry a book like that around? Are you alone here, or waiting for someone?" Camille inhaled deeply, her patience thinning. "I'm not answering any more questions unless you tell me what I'm being accused of." Her firm refusal seemed to escalate the situation. The first officer stepped forward. "Don't get smart with us," he snapped. "We're just doing our job." "And I know the law," Camille said, her voice steady. "I'm not breaking it by sitting in a public park." The officer grabbed her arm suddenly. "You're resisting," he declared loudly, though Camille had done nothing of the sort. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, startled. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder as a man pulled out his phone to record the scene. "Stop resisting," the officer repeated, his voice louder, performative. Camille felt the cold snap of handcuffs around her wrists, the humiliation and anger rising in her chest. As they led her to the cruiser, she glanced back at the crowd, locking eyes with a young woman holding up her phone. It was a silent plea to document what was happening. At the station, the process was dehumanizing. Fingerprints, mugshots, a holding cell with fluorescent lights that buzzed incessantly. The charges, resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer. Camille's legal mind raced. The accusations were baseless, but the fight ahead would be grueling. She was released on bail hours later, her friend Marissa waiting for her outside the station. "You okay?" Marissa asked, her face a mix of concern and anger. Camille nodded, though her voice was heavy. "I'm fine, but I'm not letting this slide." Back home, Camille sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal pads and open books. She outlined a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the department. Her determination grew with every message of support she received after the video of her arrest went viral. Strangers shared their own stories of injustice, their voices strengthening her resolve. Weeks passed as she built her case, immersing herself in the community. She attended town halls, listened to others' experiences, and spoke about accountability. The fight was about more than her. It was about everyone who had been silenced or dismissed. Then came the twist no one expected. Her attorney called with news the officers had filed a motion to dismiss the case. Camille expected this, but the attorney had more to say. "You've been assigned as the judge for one of their cases next month," he said carefully. The irony was staggering. Camille was now the judge in a misconduct case against the same officers who had humiliated her. Could she remain impartial? Could she deliver justice without letting her personal experiences cloud her judgment? The courtroom buzzed with tension the morning of the hearing. The officers, Carter and Daniels, sat at the defense table, their confidence shaken as Camille entered the room in her black robe. She took her seat on the bench, her expression calm yet commanding. As the hearing unfolded, Camille listened intently, her professionalism unwavering. The evidence against the officers was damning. Witnesses described a pattern of excessive force and abuse of power. Camille suppressed her personal feelings, focusing on the facts. By the end of the day, the officers were visibly shaken. The weight of their actions and the consequences they now faced was clear. Camille adjourned the hearing, her voice steady. "We will reconvene tomorrow." When the day of the ruling arrived, the courtroom was packed. Camille addressed the room with calm authority, outlining her decision. The officers were found guilty of misconduct, their punishment, suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and a formal disciplinary record. The ruling was firm but fair, emphasizing accountability and the opportunity for reform. As the gavel struck, Camille felt a sense of closure. Justice had been served, but her fight was far from over. She knew the systemic issues ran deeper than a single case. Stepping off the bench, she resolved to keep pushing for change, using her voice and her platform to ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had.